Hey everyone, welcome to the Habitat demos for Friday, May 5th. We are pretty close to release here. We've got a number of things to show you guys that are either in it or coming out in a future one. Let's start off with Fletcher, who's been doing amazing work on our scaffolding.
Cool. Okay, let me remember how to share my screen. Share my entire screen. I guess that would work. Does everybody see something?
Sure do.
Okay,
Yep.
Good. I got it. All right. So what I'm going to show is a component of what we're calling scaffolding that you may have seen some demos of before. This particular scaffolding is really hyper-focused around like Ruby-based apps. So like Ruby on Rails and Sinatra and those kinds of things. So in your mind, if you think of like, could I deploy this to a platform as a service? And what would it take to get my app into something like that? This is exactly what this Ruby scaffolding is kind of focused on. So this was a bit of a driving example to get us there. What I have here on the top is a Rails 5 app. All I did was I installed the Rails gem, and I ran Rails new, and I made a little Rails app that doesn't really have much functionality right now, but it's to give you a flavor of the idea. And then I made one change to the gem file. This would be similar if I was going to deploy this this Rails app to a platform like Heroku, and I wanted to use Postgres, which is a pretty common thing. I just swapped out the SQLite 3 that they generated for me for the PG one. I know there's a flag in the generator, I just couldn't remember it. I'm just adding this one gem on all platforms. It has to do time zone data, and it makes your app more portable in Habitat. So just you can kind of ignore that detail. If I go to start a build here, so down below here, I've got a Habitat Studio that's just kind of waiting for me, and I'm gonna build my Rails app and get that started. And on the top here, I'm gonna show you how this is being driven. So this is the Habitat plan for my Rails app. So the idea is, because it's my own app, I would like put my plan and any other stuff and like version control it in. And you can see there's not a lot going on. This is probably just like a minimal version of a plan to kind of make it work in this context. So you can add other stuff. You can see I don't even really have if you've seen Habitat plans before, I don't have runtime or build time dependency arrays set up. They're empty right now. And this scaffolding that I'm pulling in is kind of doing a whole lot of the work for me. So for anybody who's used Habitat before, you might notice this looks kind of like a package identifier, and it is. That's the implementation ships as a package, which means we can update it in the normal ways. But for me, as a Rails app developer, I don't really care about this. I just know there's a few lines of things I need to do. We'll have better help kind of in the very near future with our generators to kind of give you this bare minimum that's focused for your app. And if I go to the bottom here, oh, see, that worked so much quicker. So in the build output, there's kind of a new idea, I guess, that we have with scaffolding that you might not have seen in some of the other Habitat plans. This is the idea that the build system can kind of detect and react to your application and the needs that your app needs based on kind of what we know about the generic frameworks. So what I mean by that, you can see up here that we've figured out that I have a Rails 5 app here. Now, how did we do that? Because it's a Ruby-based one, we're looking for a gem file because all modern Ruby projects have a gem file, and we're able to look and inspect your lock file to see that you have some of those like key Rails gems and of a certain version. So for this, we're actually loading in your lock file in some Ruby code so that we're not doing like grepping or anything. We're actually doing like proper native inspection of that dependency thing. You can see here that we've detected I had a Git directory. So behind the scenes, we're actually adding Git as a build dependency so we can do more intelligent copying that'll honor your Git ignore. This is kind of a pretty nice one that we detected the PG gem, which means what this app probably is going to need at runtime is a database dependency that's Postgres. So we're doing a few things. We're adding some Postgres libraries so that the PG gem, which has native code, can actually build itself properly. We're also going to set you up with a binding from the package. So there'll be a database binding. That means when this app boots up, it actually needs something and it'll expect that. And then there's a few gems here that we kind of know are common. So Nokogiri is one that has, again, more native libraries to build. We know that if you have the exec.js gem, that like under the hood, at some point, you're actually going to need Node around on path. So we'll add Node for you if you have that. If you don't have these gems around, you don't pay the price. So we're not trying to overburden your package with extra stuff that you don't need. And this also deals with figuring out what version of Ruby you need to run. So we're kind of looking in a few places. So if you're a Ruby developer and if you've used that Ruby keyword in your gem file, we're looking at that. So if that's set, we're going to try and map that to a Habitat package. It's still pretty simple logic right now, and we're going to make that better over time. It'll also look in your plan. There's a special scaffolding variable where you can say this is my like Habitat package of Ruby that I want you to use to build and run with. And if nothing's there, like in my case, because I didn't have anything in my gem file, it's just going to default to our normal latest MRI package of Ruby, which is probably what you wanted to start with, I would hope. And then as we kind of go down, the other thing I'll just maybe point out is bundle install, which is dealing with more than a few native gem dependencies. So if anyone has done these builds on like Ubuntu servers or on other platforms, I had to do this on an Ubuntu one like yesterday, and I kept getting my bundle installs were failing. And then I was looking on Stack Overflow to remember like what packages do I need to get PG to build, and then Nokogiri to build, and there was one other one. It was terrible. So this is something that the Habitat build system will take care of for you, so I don't really need to worry about that anymore. And the kind of the final package here, if anyone is curious, internals of the Habitat package are not really all that interesting, but you can see under this apps directory right now, there's my Rails app. You can see there's a couple interesting symlinks. That's something that the supervisor is going to set up for us because it's a Rails app, so there are known places where Rails will write stuff into like sockets and stuff. So we deal with all that. If I was to go over here, I've basically already done a hab package export to Docker. I'm taking just a previous build of my package and basically made a Docker image, which is already, we've supported that for a long time. And then what I'm going to do is just start it up with a couple extra flags. So the peer flag here, if you haven't seen that before, this is joining other supervisors into what we call a ring, so that the database can be discovered. This happens to be the address of the Postgres database that I'm running just in this window here. So there's our Postgres running in a Habitat supervisor. And the bindings here, this bind flag is, again, something that we've done because we saw you had a PG gem, so we know there's a database dependency you need at runtime. And all this is really doing in Habitat speak is saying we have this label called database that we need to fulfill with a service group, like a cluster. And this PostgreSQL.default is that service group or that cluster of services that are going to fulfill the database. And I'm just starting this up in a leader topology. There's no real need for this particular one. It's just interesting to show that like we're actually, the supervisors are waiting to get a minimal like voting set before starting up. And you'll see here, all of the apps are actually just kind of in this failing loop. And this is on purpose. So we have a hook when your app boots up. It's called an init hook. So it happens kind of on like before your app actually starts up, so we can sort of set the table. And in modern Rails apps, this secret key base is needed for your cookie stuff. And in Rails 4.1 and up or something, it's an environment variable by default. Platforms like Heroku give this to you. So all we're really doing here is we know there's something that we need to actually run this app properly, and we don't have it. And we can't necessarily generate one for you because they all need to be the same, right? This is like just a cluster of app nodes. So what I'm going to do in this other window below the database is I'm going to try this again. And what I'm doing is I'm using another part of Habitat, which is applying some runtime configuration. So the stuff before this Unix pipe is I'm just making a little TOML entry saying my secret key base, my configuration for this is a random UUID thing here, which is I'm just shelling back out to Rails secret, and that generates me a secret. And I'm piping it into this hab apply. So this is basically, I'm sending this TOML configuration out into the gossip ring. I'm targeting my app. So this is my happyfriends.default. This is my cluster of Rails app nodes. And this is basically a way just to give me a versioned document that keeps going up. That's number of seconds since, the start of Unix. And you can see the database above there is now all doing these weird things with fatals and stuff. If we go back here, that's because we've gotten through the first gate of a required thing. And now in our init hook, what we're doing is making sure we can actually talk to the database. At this moment in time, it's hard to know who actually owns the database creation. So the PostgreSQL isn't making the database, and the app right now isn't making the database because we don't know who needs to own the credentials. So that is something we're going to make a little bit better over time. What I'm going to do here is I'm just, this command on the bottom is I'm just execing into this Docker container that has my Postgres server, and I'm just creating my user and the database and granting privileges just so that it exists. But once I do that, and I create the role, you're going to see if I go back, yeah, you can see all of my supervisors now have actually made that database connection. So now they're allowing the Rails app to start. And here's all our Pumas starting up. And if I was to go to a web page, if this was behind a load balancer, now I'm going to see my Rails application come up and greet me, which is a rather nice thing. I've never had a system where I could actually deploy my apps before the database is even ready. And with Habitat, there's now a much nicer way to do kind of deployment for all this stuff. I think that's mostly what I wanted to say about that. I could probably come back to the other stuff after, if that makes sense.
This is effing brilliant, man.
Yeah, man.
It's nice, isn't it? So my previous life before Habitat, before doing infrastructure and service stuff, was I really enjoyed being a Rails developer. It was just really hard to deploy Rails apps, and I feel like it's finally feeling really good.
That was a great demo, Fletcher. Like, also way to show the failing case, and then show how, the apps will wait for the binds, and then when the binds are available, you can see the failure in the authentication, and then you create the password in the database, and it's really neat to see that. Like, the way servers are supposed to work is,
I know,
retry until they're ready, right? And this is a great demonstration of that power.
So it means that your Rails app can make a bit better. It can kind of assume in a bit better case that there is probably a database there. I know I've written that code on Rails initialization. I'm trying to ping everything to make sure it's there. Nowadays, all I would do is just tell my Rails app, just die if you don't get anything, because I know with Habitat, it's just going to try to keep running it until success, but it's so good.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that what we showed today was a Ruby and a Rails example. This is the one that we were just targeting because we know that there is some pain there. We have some expertise in the team it's really nice to scratch that itch of a thing that has been painful to a Ruby developer. A number of us have developed Ruby in the past, and to get that solved, that feels really good. But we are also targeting Python, Node.js, Go. We've got a couple of scaffoldings, and you can write these yourself too. We'll have documentation about how you can do that if you want to get involved. We've got some more coming out, so look forward to that.
And if you happen to have any Rails apps and want to kick the tires and have any feedback, we're all very, very interested in this. So it'd be great to get any feedback.
Yeah, so we can come back if you get some more. For now, why don't we just jump over to Chris? He's got some sweet UI to show us.
Yeah, let's see. I'll share here. Last week we showed showed some improvements to the signed out experience to the Depot UI. This week we're just going to show a couple of signed in improvements. So today, if you visit the Depot UI, you get like if this goes, this is taking a while. Here we go. You get a list of packages, and after you sign in, you get a list of packages. So we want to try to make this a little bit nicer for kind of new and frequent visitors to the Depot. So one thing we did here was make a new homepage, basically. I'm going to sign in here as my dad because he doesn't have any, he's new to Habitat. And so the first thing we see is the dashboard view here. And as this loads, as a new user, I can get like an introduction, a couple links to demos and tutorials, maybe learn about how to make an origin, that sort of thing. So just a nicer experience for kind of first-time visitors. And if I sign in like as myself, so I'm signed in here, I happen to have some origins. I have one origin that doesn't have any packages. So here I have like a link to learn how to make and upload packages. And when I switch to like an origin that has packages, I can just see something about the last few that have been updated. Yeah, so that's it. Just a few improvements for new and frequent visitors. That's it.
Yeah, and you can see that that brilliant new dark theme that we've got going on here.
Oh yeah.
We just pushed out the docs and an update to the tutorials. We've got some more updates for those coming, but those are reskinned as well, and those are also out now in the public. All right, Matt, how about you show us some improvements to the supervisor?
Yeah. Okay. Let's share the screen. Okay. So yeah, so we've made some improvements and some basic fixes to the supervisor. So right now, currently, I have a supervisor running. It's got one service loaded into it. It's got MySQL loaded in, and so the first thing I'm going to show is I'm going to load another service. I'm going to load just a web app, and oh, what happened? Let's see. Oh, let me 1 second. Yeah, try that again. Oh. Oh gosh. Let's see. What did I do wrong here? Local cache. I just turn that off. On the right. Yep. You know, let's why don't we come back to me if we can?
Yeah, of course, no problem, man. This is what live demos do. All right, how about Salim? Get some build server stuff.
Okay, sure. Let me share my screen. And so what I'm going to demo is basically a few improvements we've been making to the builder services. And the first thing I'm going to show is basically the package graph. So the way the builder services work is we construct internally a graph of all the dependencies of the various packages. So when we build and upload a package, we can automatically build the reverse dependencies, all the packages that depend on that package. So in previous demos, the graph that we've had was about 3,000 nodes with all of the packages. What we've done now is pruned it. We don't really need every single version of packages in the graph because we really only look at the latest ones. So the graph is much smaller now. We're just looking at the latest versions. So now we have, previously there were about 3,000 nodes with all the versions. Now we have about 677. That lets us basically, the graph is more performant. It's less memory internally. So it's a improvement that we made. The second thing I need to show is I'm going to do a demo of uploading Hab Studio. So I'm going to quick show this tool, and let's take a look at the reverse dependencies on Hab Studio. So we can see here there's three packages that depend on Hab Studio. There's package Dockerize, Encore, package ACI, and then we have a non-core package as well. In the first iteration of the builder services, we will really be focusing on only building core packages. So one of the tweaks that we made is we'll show the builds, but we'll build and upload only those core packages. Okay, so we'll get out of this tool and do Studio, enter, and I need to go to Studio. Now we're just going to kick off a Studio build.
Did we lose Salim?
Yeah, I'm starting to wonder.
Yeah, I think so. I was like, well, I don't see any output from that build.
Normally it's a little peppier than that.
Well, we can come back to him.
I've recovered, by the way, so we can switch back to me and then switch back to him.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. My issue was actually quite simple. I misspelled my service name. So anyway, right, let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and load the service into the supervisor. And so one thing that you'll notice here, what we had.
Your video died.
Somebody says, okay.
Yeah, your video looks like it's died.
Oh, what's died?
Your video's just not showing. Is it?
Okay.
I think
I'm
so.
seeing it.
You might need to like unclick the little person at the bottom, Jamie. I did the same thing.
Okay, let me.
You got him? Yeah.
Whoa.
Ah!
Okay, can everybody see this?
Yeah.
I love it, Matt, that at least once every time we get the cool like infinite recursion.
Yes. Okay, so I started. So one thing to note here is what we had been doing is when you type load or type start, and there's a supervisor currently loading, it goes ahead and loads or starts that service into the running supervisor, which it's still doing that, but the command would just immediately come back, and you didn't get any feedback in the CLI, in the shell where you are running the CLI. So we're trying to give you some feedback as to what's happening and did everything go okay or not. So in this case, you can see that it was trying to bring up my web service. It was waiting, and then eventually it says that it's successfully loaded. And then, so that's great. We get some feedback there at load or start time. We can also get some feedback at any time by using a new command called status. So all you have to do is call, so at a minimum, you can call status off of the supervisor, and you'll get status, so by doing it that way, you can get status on all of your services that are running. So right now I can see the two services that are running. I can see that they're both up. So it would tell me, like, for example, if one service was up and one service was down, like maybe it's a persistent service that I had stopped, it would tell me that it was stopped. If they're up, it will tell me the PID that they're running under, and it's also going to tell me that no matter what state, how long they've been in that state. So I've been here for 100 seconds exactly at the time that I ran this. So that's nice. So we get some feedback there. So another thing that we've done is we've changed. So we've made some slight modifications and enhancements to the way that services can update themselves. So the first, there's really two that I want to talk about. The first is using the at-once strategy. So what we've been doing is using the at-once strategy. It'll basically pull the depot. Actually, either strategy, the at-once or rolling. It'll pull the depot, look for a new package. If it sees a new package, it will update you. If you're in the at-once, it doesn't worry about other peers. It'll just update you as soon as it sees one in there. Now, a common dev scenario is you may be kind of hacking on your service, and you want to see how those upgrade scenarios will work, but you don't want to actually upload that new dev built package into a depot. You just want to see it in real time right there. So what we've done is we've made a change to the at-once strategy. The rolling strategy remains the same, but for at-once, we will not only pull the depot, but we'll also pull just your local cache, your local package directory. So right now, you can see I've got these services running. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cheat, and I'm just going to go to my services directory, and I'm going to rename this guy to 32. So you can, you basically, this would simulate if I had rebuilt this package and I had installed it, it would get a higher number because these are the releases for this particular package. So I'll make this a 32. So he's going to show up here at the bottom, and so now it can take anywhere from, depending on where I am in the service cycle, it can take anywhere from 0 to 60 seconds for this to update. Now, before, this would have never updated. I would have had to have to uploaded that package up into the depot. But now, momentarily, I should start seeing this. I should see this guy come down and then come back up. Yep, there he goes. So he's down, he's back up. And another nice thing is I can use that status command. So you can see the last time I called the status command, I could take a look. Okay, I'm at 31 there. So I'm gonna run the status command again now, and I can see that I'm at 32. So so that's one update scenario that we've kind of made nicer for the dev scenario. There's another dev scenario too that we've patched up. This is kind of along the same vein. So let's say you don't have any update strategy. You're using the none update strategy, and you're hacking on your service. You make some changes, and let's say you've got a previous version of that service currently loading in the supervisor. So right now I've got this 32 version running in the supervisor. Let's totally unload it. So I'm gonna unload that service. I should be able to see with the status command. Yep, I only see one service in there now. So now let's just say I've been hacking on it, and again I'm gonna cheat here, and I'm just going to rename it, and so we'll just assume that I've been hacking on it. I rebuilt one, and now I've got a 33 version. So now let's go ahead and load that sucker back in. And so so clearly the expectation now is that that's the version I'm going to load back in, right? Well, a bug that we had was that wasn't what was happening. You were getting basically a previous version loaded back in, along with all of its configuration, and now I expect to see this newer version. So let's do another status, and I should see. Yes, I do. I see 33 is loaded up. So those are the upgrade scenarios I want to talk about. So the next thing I want to show is some fixing that we did to the binds. So we had a bug, and this was actually a pretty, I think, significant bug, and it's been in there for a few releases now too, where if you've got, so in this case, I've got a web application that's binding to a database, very common scenario. And if I want to, in mid-flight while the supervisor is running, update the configuration of my database, what was happening is if you update the configuration of a service that you were exposing or exporting binds from, the configuration would stick just fine to that particular service, but the service that's bound to it. So in this case, if you had a web service, so let's say in fact, we're going to do this. I'm going to change the port, and if I had a web service that was bound to it, that web service wasn't getting its bindings weren't updating, and it was just sticking to the same port. So just so to show this, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to cat out the configuration file just so we can see what it looks like before of our web service. Okay, so I'm right now I'm binding to basically the default port of MySQL 3306. So let's go ahead and update the TOML. So we're going to update it to, so in this kind of this dummy TOML I have here, I've got port 3326. So let's now find my history. Here we go. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go do a config apply to MySQL. So I expect MySQL to come down and come back up on that new port. And not only that, but I expect my web service that's binding to it, I'm expecting its config now to bind to the new port. So let's take a look. Let's cat that back out. And there we go. So 3326, it's, that is now binding correctly. And I think that is all that I had planned to show. So that's some enhancements to the supervisor.
Awesome work, man. That's a bunch of small little things that all add up to a hell of a lot better experience. Unfortunately, the things that I've been working on, I can't show just yet. And there's like not a whole lot to show. Really, this week I rewrote the whole templating module inside the supervisor, which is a very large change. What we're hoping to do is get that in today and a release out. And what that will allow you to do is some things like, for instance, if you start a number of services inside the same supervisor, they'll automatically find each other. At least you don't have to set a bind. So like they'll find the other service groups within their own supervisor. Yeah, a number of small improvements there. Clarity around why a configuration or a template's failing to compile. Much less chance of those happening. Our helpers should be more reliable as well inside the templating language. So there's a bunch of great fixes along with what Matt showed coming out in the supervisor release, which we're going to try to do today or by Monday at the very least. Salim, now that you're back, man, would you like to?
Yeah, definitely. Let me share my screen. And where did I drop off in the demo? I noticed it while I was in the middle. So I basically, at this point, have built this Hab package. Can everybody hear me, by the way, and see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I built this package and I'm going to upload it. But before I do that, the other thing I wanted to show is that in previous demos, we've always had one build worker doing the builds, even though we were able to dispatch in parallel. Now we have two build workers running here. So that's basically getting us started on scaling out how many workers can do builds. So this package, Hab Studio, there's two packages that depend on it. So we should be seeing both of those builds kicking off after I upload it. So now I'm going to do Hab package upload, and it's going to be in components, studio results. And so that's being uploaded, and there's a bunch of activity that's kicking off on the left-hand side. There's the builder services doing their thing. We should see, here's the first worker kicked off. It's doing some stuff. And then shortly we will see the other one also doing something. So again, back to this UI. This one, there was 3 versions, and when we complete, we should see 4. And then up here in Dockerize, we should also see 4 when these builds are done. The other thing I pointed out, I don't know if it was caught in the last, before my demo broke off, but any non-core packages that are reverse dependencies, we won't build them initially. We will only rebuild core packages. So for example, here you see there's only 3. The non-core package was not built or uploaded. If I go in here, still 3. Let's see, yeah, it's still doing something. I don't think the build's completed yet. So maybe you can see if the worker has any output here on the left-hand side. There's just a lot of output to wait through at this point. So maybe I won't do that. I'll just, oh yeah, something happened. So let's check this again, see if it's completed. Yeah, so now there's 4. So you can see that package ACI has completed. There's 4 as well. So we were able to successfully take all the reverse dependencies, build them. And if you remember the last demo, the last time I had demoed this scenario, it took a while longer. So it was faster because we had multiple workers running. So that's it. That's the demo.
Perfect, man. Perfect, man. It's great to see that finally come together. You'll notice that there's no log output or anything like that showing up. This is we're still looking that up to the UI. CM is pushing that through right now, and that is something that we hope that'll be in the initial release. So you won't have to just wonder if your builds are going to finish or not. Fletcher, did you have anything left that you wanted to show?
Yeah, I got just a couple of sprinklings, and this is all in the theme of like I'm a developer and I don't like who enjoys boilerplate and who enjoys copy pasta. I don't think like many of us do. So I got, I guess, 2 things that are in that theme. So I'm just going to share the screen back. So the first is what I'm going to do is just load up a plan. Let's say our habitat plan. The details here aren't totally important, except to say that this is like our habitat hab CLI code base, which means that like this plan is versioned and committed into the code base of the application or the service. So that means like I'm building my software, not somebody else's software. And as a result, if you've done our demo before or looked at other plans, you're going to see weird little things like this package source line with something that kind of looks like a URL or a tarball, but it kind of looks suspicious. And then stuff here at the bottom with a bunch of maybe sometimes with a comment saying like we have to like turn these things off. This was behavior we kind of left around for, in my opinion, because I was responsible for some of this, for far too long. So this is already shipped. This is in the current stable release. You can now get rid of this package source line. It's no longer required for the build system. When you remove it, what it's going to do is change a few of the behaviors around doing that, like downloading, verifying. It basically isn't going to do any of that and assume that your code lives with your plan, or your plan lives with your code. So in that case, I was looking. We hadn't updated this yet, probably because I was waiting for the release to ship and then update the plans. So if I deleted that and then went to these this like copy pasted pattern, if you've done this or seen this, just get rid of them. Pretend like we never had it. You can send PRs if you see them in other places with package sources that are just sort of like faked out. We can get rid of all those and then pretend like that didn't exist. And I got it right when we launched like a year ago. Why don't I just write that? So the other thing I wanted to show was if I go back to this Rails app example, I've got a my plan here, which is again like pretty small. But what if I knew how I wanted to version this Rails app and it wasn't necessarily, like maybe it's related to this and it means that when I do a new version or I do like a git tag or something like that, if that's how I'm versioning it, I'd have to remember to like come back into this file and bump a version, and like that seems a bit weird having it in 2 places. So we have a little feature that'll be landing in this release, which is a way to help you more dynamically determine a version. If you know how to get your version, you can remove this line. And we're doing this with, I guess there's 2 ideas going on. The first is how do I determine my version? You can do that with a little function here that we've provided, and I'm just looking at my crib notes so I can remember, because what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use a git command, and all this is going to do is just give me an integer of how many commits that I've got. So this is actually a pretty, at its core, this is how we're versioning the builder services, is just a big number that keeps increasing because we're putting this all server side and we want it to be continuously deployed. So this might not be how I do my Rails app, but heck, maybe it is. So this is the how. It's just a little function. As long as it prints the standard output, a string, that string is going to be captured and uses the version. The other question is when should I compute my version? If I'm building my own software, I can actually do that pretty early in the process. So we have this new build phase that's called do before. And that happens when all the package dependencies are installed and your path is kind of mostly set, but before like the download phase and the do prepare phase and all that happens. This lets us, we've had to hook into this in other weird places in the past, where we've had to hook into do download because we know it's the first place I could do, like recompute a package version. That's why we kind of let you do this in this new place. And all you really need to do is call this function called update package version. What it's going to do is it's going to call your package version function and then recompute some of the other build variables that are kind of like dependent on the value of package version, if that makes sense. So this looks like a little bit of overhead. The other thing that I would want to add here is, so I'm shelling out to Git, right? And I can't necessarily depend on that being there. If I add myself a build dependency though on core Git, I know that Git is on my path when I do the build. I don't need it in, you know, at runtime in production. I just need it to generate my package version. So this is about all you need to get a more dynamically versioned thing. I have a feeling what we'll probably do in the, at least in this Ruby scaffolding, is probably let you do something like this, where if you want to do this, is just drop that package version and set up the function and do what you need to do in there, and we can try to call this for you at the right time. I hadn't really decided if that was like totally worth doing, but I kind of like the way it looks, and that would be the way I would just expect to be able to version my Rails app. So that's what we've got here. Just trying to reduce more boilerplate for everybody, and make a little bit of a happier experience. This to me, like, you know, 3 variables and a function to dynamically fix a version makes me pretty happy. So I hope it makes other people happy too.
I immediately went and used it, so it made me pretty happy.
I noticed, and it looks like you used it in the way I was hoping, so that's good.
Yeah.
We ended up needing this ourselves, and we held off because like making something for ourselves might be like we might be optimizing for a weird case, but this has shown up in the wild. We didn't really have good support for it, so as we changed little things in the build system, it affected some people's hacks because we did the same hacks. So this, I hope, is a more supported way that you can get what you probably wanted, and maybe you didn't know to ask for it. So hopefully this will be a delighter, I hope.
All right, I think that's it for us today. This was a long one. Thank you guys for watching and sticking with us through this. We had a whole lot of great stuff to show, and we will see you next week with a bunch more great stuff. We'll see ya.